Welcome to this explainer. Today we are undertaking a truly profound journey. We're going to examine the tangible, undeniable historical evidence of our times, and we're going to see exactly how it intersects with the deep eschatological theology of the end times. Now, for those of you joining this adult Bible study group, I just want you to go ahead and settle in. We're going to intentionally slow our cadence down today. We're taking a very deliberate, careful look at how God is moving in real time, pulling together what's known as the Commonwealth of Israel. Okay, let's dive right into our structured syllabus for today. We'll be looking at Section 1, the physical miracle of return. Section 2, the Commonwealth of Israel. Section 3, grafted in, which is all about the olive tree. Section 4, the remnant and the watch. Section 5 covers the tribulation and false peace. And finally, Section 6, all Israel will be saved. All right, Section 1, the physical miracle of return. Before we can even begin to truly grasp the spiritual mystery of the end times, we really have to look at what has literally happened on the earth. We are witnessing events that are grounded in physical, undeniable historical facts. To understand the absolute miracle of this land coming alive, you first have to realize how completely it had died. Back in 1867, the American writer Mark Twain traveled to the Holy Land. Now, he was a skeptic, right? He was just writing what he saw. And he described a totally desolate wasteland, a silent, sun-blasted ruin where the very soil itself seemed cursed. Yet, flash forward to the 20th century, and we see just an astonishing sequence of events. Despite the absolute horrors of the Second World War, a movement began. In 1947, in a miraculous 33-13 United Nations vote, the two great mortal enemies of the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union, somehow voted together on one single major issue: the partition of the land. And then in 1948, a nation that had been scattered for 2 millennia was reborn. But behind these historical dates lies a staggering, almost heartbreaking human element: 53,000. Now, these weren't just statistics on a page. These were frightened, exhausted, yet incredibly hopeful human beings, largely Holocaust survivors and orphans. They literally walked out of the ashes of Europe, boarded these barely seaworthy boats aiming for their ancestral homeland, only to be stopped dead in their tracks by the British Navy. So instead of finding immediate refuge, these 53,000 souls were actually placed behind barbed wire in detention camps on the island of Cyprus. And this brilliantly illustrates how the heavens themselves actually responded to this human struggle. The late British Bible teacher David Pawson charted 100 years of rainfall in Israel. Now, because in this specific land, weather doesn't just come from all directions, the west wind brings life-giving rain from the Mediterranean, while the east wind brings desert drought. God literally tied the rain to his relationship with the people. Pawson's chart showed an incredible correlation. As Jews began returning, or making aliyah, the rainfall steadily rose. But during those specific years when the 53,000 survivors were blocked and held in the Cyprus camps, the rising rainfall stalled. It just flattened right out. And the single highest rainfall year on his entire century-long chart, 1948, the exact year the state of Israel was reborn. It is, quite literally, a physical miracle. Moving on to Section 2, the Commonwealth of Israel. Now we really need to shift our focus to the theological mystery behind this physical return. How does this end gathering function spiritually? And honestly, who exactly is being gathered? To understand this, we have to go all the way back to the biblical split of the United Kingdom of Israel. Following King Solomon, the nation split right in two. The southern kingdom, the House of Judah, which we know today as the Jewish people, remained. But the northern kingdom, which consisted of 10 tribes and is often called the House of Israel or Ephraim, well, they went after other gods. After centuries of spiritual adultery, God did something incredibly severe. He gave the northern kingdom a certificate of divorce and scattered them out into the pagan nations. In the book of Hosea, chapter 1, the prophet actually gives us two pretty chilling Hebrew terms for these divorced 10 tribes. The first is lo ruchama, which literally means no mercy. And the second is lo ami, meaning not my people. Over time, these 10 tribes were utterly lost to history. They were swallowed up by the Gentile nations, completely and totally assimilated into pagan cultures. But here's the catch. God promised to eventually restore the two kingdoms back into one. And this created what eschatology scholars call the divine dilemma. You see, according to God's own law in Deuteronomy 24, a divorced woman is strictly forbidden from returning to her first husband after she has been with others. This was the curse of the law. So the question is, how on earth could a righteous, perfectly just God bring his divorced, adulterous people back to himself without breaking his own law? So the absolutely crucial point here is how this seemingly impossible dilemma was resolved. And the answer is, it was resolved at the cross. Jesus' death effectively canceled the old covenant marriage and broke the curse of the law. Think about it. Because the husband died, the divorced woman was legally released from the law that condemned her. This profound resolution allowed those who were once labeled not my people to step right into the Commonwealth of Israel as full, restored citizens. Both the Jews and those hidden, assimilated tribes living within the nations could now be united together in one single household of God.
Which brings us to Section 3, Grafted In, the olive tree.
This brings us into a deep, highly analytical reading of the Apostle Paul's letter to the Romans, specifically chapter 11, which beautifully explores how God sees this new, unified body. Paul uses a really powerful metaphor here. He speaks of a cultivated olive tree, which represents the root of Israel. Now, because of unbelief, some natural branches were broken off, and you, the Gentiles, being a wild olive branch, completely unnatural to this tree, were miraculously grafted in by grace. You now get to partake in the rich, life-giving root of the olive tree. But Paul is also super quick to remind us that God absolutely did not reject his people. He points back to the days of Elijah. Remember, Elijah thought he was literally the only faithful believer left on earth. But God told him, I have reserved for myself 7,000 men who have not bowed the knee to Baal. The point is, even at this present time, there is a remnant chosen by grace, not by works. God's hand is always, always preserving his true people. And this leads us to one of the most profound mysteries in all of Scripture. Paul writes that a partial hardening has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. Now think about this carefully. That fullness of the Gentiles likely includes the actual descendants of those scattered, divorced, lost tribes of the northern kingdom who were totally swallowed up by the nations. Think about it. There are millions of believers grafted in from the Gentiles today who may not even know their own ancient ancestry, returning to the Commonwealth of Israel entirely through grace. Let's look at Section 4, the remnant and the watch. So if these are the theological realities of the end times, what exactly is our role today? Well, our role is to be watchmen on the wall, observing the prophetic horizon with very sober eyes. Let's look at David Pawson's 7 prophetic verbs. He studied the scriptures intensely and identified 7 sequential events promised for the physical and spiritual remnant before the very end. They will be repatriated, settled, attacked, deceived, protected, saved, and finally become a blessing. It is absolutely vital for us to understand that the miraculous physical return we see happening today, the repatriation and the settling, is really just the beginning of the sequence. It's an unfinished sign.
Which takes us to Section 5, Tribulation and False Peace.
We must zoom in on the darker, far more sobering verbs that the watchmen warn are still to come before the final deliverance. As a study group, we can't flinch from what the source texts impartially report. Let's look at how this builds. Pawson outlines a coming tribulation based on Scripture. Step 1. Attacked. The texts warn of a terrible future assault. Eschatological sources often point to Zechariah chapter 12 here, where Jerusalem becomes a heavy stone, a stumbling block to the whole world, which many scholars identify as the catalyst for World War III. Step 2. Deceived. The texts outline that the nation, along with much of the world, will actually be temporarily taken in by the deception of a false peace. This is often orchestrated by a global system referred to in these eschatological studies as a New World Order. But then, thankfully, comes Step 3, protected. Through the absolute worst of this global pressure and conflict, God will throw a supernatural shield over his people. I want to just slow down here for a second and offer some deep comfort to those of you studying this with us. As the world shakes, and it will, remember this foundational truth. There are no lost tribes to God. A God who has numbered every single hair on your head doesn't just misplace an entire nation. During this coming tribulation, God knows exactly where every single member of his remnant is, whether they are Jewish or a Gentile believer carrying the long-forgotten blood of Ephraim. They are known and they will be supernaturally sealed and shielded. And finally, Section 6, all Israel will be saved. This right here is the true climax of our explainer, the ultimate salvation and the prophetic destiny of this beautifully combined remnant of God. Pawson called this the most exciting verb of all, saved. Romans 11:26 promises that in the end, all Israel will be saved. Now, this doesn't mean every single individual who ever lived throughout history, but rather a massive, sweeping remnant representing the whole nation collectively turning and finally recognizing their true Messiah. The deliverer will come out of Zion and take away their sins once and for all. And that incredible salvation leads directly to the final verb, blessing. Look, even in their partially returned, fractured state today, this tiny fraction of the world's population has been a profound blessing to humanity. I mean, they hold roughly 20% of all Nobel Prizes. From Einstein's groundbreaking equations to Jonas Salk's polio vaccine, right down to the drip irrigation and desalination technology that literally feeds and waters the planet today. Ask yourself this: if this scattered, broken people is already this much of a blessing to the world, how unimaginably great will the blessing be when the remnant is completely restored physically and spiritually in the final days? But we do need to remain grounded in where we are on the timeline. Pawson often quoted Winston Churchill to describe our current moment. Not the end, not even the beginning of the end, but the end of the beginning. The miracle of the return to the land and the grafting in of the Gentiles into the Commonwealth of Israel is really just the opening movement of God's final, grand narrative. So we want to leave you with this final, vital question to ponder. The cloud the size of a man's hand has already appeared on the horizon. The wind has shifted and the remnant is actively gathering from the four corners of the earth as we speak. The Commonwealth of Israel is literally being assembled right before our eyes. So, will you be awake when the deliverer arrives? Keep watching, keep studying the scriptures, and hold fast to the grace you've been given.